versus the frogs. Another true story. We moved into our first home on January 10th, 1992. What a day. What a home. What a great backyard. What made the backyard so great was that it did not have a swimming pool. After spending my teenage years fishing snakes and armadillos, both alive and not alive, out of our family pool, and endless attempts at trying to get the prime back, I vowed never to have a swimming pool. That's what country clubs are for, right? Fortunately, my wife agreed. However, seeing how she comes from a nursery and landscaping family, we did decide that a beautiful pond with a waterfall situated right outside the breakfast room window would be a perfect addition. You can't get more low maintenance than a pond with no fish in it, can you? I thought so, but as we will soon see, I was wrong. Very, very wrong. The troubles started in May. My wife and I were relaxing and watching TV around dusk when we were attacked by a monster. At least that's what my wife thought when we heard an incredibly loud "brap, brap." That's not a monster, that's a bullfrog, I said. It probably hopped over from the creek that runs next to the golf course. I'll go gently scoop it up and return it to its native habitat. Taking a plastic beer pitcher that we use to scoop dog food, that's exactly what I did. It was easy. There was little to no vegetation around this pond yet, and Mr. Bullfrog was just sitting out in the open, waiting for his ride in the beer pitcher. I coaxed him into the pitcher, walked a couple houses over to the creek, and said, "Be free, Mr. Bullfrog. Enjoy your day." My kindness was not returned. Mr. Bullfrog showed up at our house several more times over the next couple months, and sometimes he brought a couple friends. But still, it was no great task to scoop up the members of the Bullfrog party and give them all pleasant rides to the golf course. However, I began to suspect that this was always the same group of bullfrogs. Clearly, they would take a few days to hop from the creek back to my pond. While scooping them up wasn't that big of a deal, it did seem that the bullfrogs were showing up a little later in the evening each time they returned to my castle. Sooner or later, they'd be cutting into my bedtime. Not acceptable. So the next time they showed up, I scooped them up, which I noticed was getting harder to do. But instead of taking them to that nice babbling creek, I very gently dumped them down a gutter and into wherever gutters go. I figured that by the time the frogs got out of the sewer system, they'd be a long way from my house. Shucks, for all I knew, the sewer system was the greatest place a bullfrog could ever live. I felt good about myself. The bullfrogs, however, once again did not return my kindness, but it took a few months for their villainy to surface, as bullfrogs go somewhere else or maybe do other things in the fall, winter, and early spring. Apparently, one of those other things they do is plot how to take revenge on humans who very gently place them into the greater Houston sewer system, because in the spring of 1993, they returned with a vengeance. As a native Houstonian, you can bet that yes, I do take a shower every night before bed. Imagine my disappointment that May night in 1993 when the missus and I had just settled in bed ready to watch Arsenio Hall or the Gary Shandling show or whatever hip young Houstonians were watching back then. And then, rap, 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 crap. I couldn't sleep through their croaking. It was simply too loud. So I got out of bed and went to the pond where I found out several interesting things. First of all, there was now a lot of vegetation around our pond, which of course was used as hiding places by the frogs. And yeah, the frogs, plural. Second, if they weren't in the vegetation, they were in the pond, but not out in the open like a nice frog. They were hiding underneath the rocks that circled the edge of the pond. I'd go out at night, about 10 p.m. or later, armed with my beer pitcher, the business end of my dog's pooper scooper, and a flashlight. I needed the flashlight to spot the frogs underneath those rocks, or camouflaged in the vegetation. I was dressed for battle, which meant all I had on were the shorts I slept in, but I assumed the frogs would be easy to gather up. They weren't. That's when I learned that while frogs might not have ears, they sure can feel you move. I'd walk out there and immediately the croaking would stop. How was I going to find the frogs if they weren't going to be decent about it and give up their hiding places by croaking? I had to step onto one of the rocks circling the pond and then stand perfectly still for 2 or 3 minutes, tricking the frogs into thinking I'd left. Then they'd start up their infernal croaking and I'd root them out into the middle of the pond with the pooper scooper and ladle them into the beer pitcher for humane relocation. I told you these frogs had been plotting against me for months. Let me tell you, they were downright evil. They'd bait me out at night, and I'd get 2 or 3 of them. I'd stand stock still until I was sure I'd got all of them. Then I'd go back inside and, of course, had to take another shower. That's when the 2 frogs who'd kept silent through all this would start croaking. After a month of catching some frogs, being sure that I got all of them, taking my second shower of the night, and then having to spend another 30 minutes getting those last 2 pests, and then having to take another shower, I was a wreck. There were nights when the second wave of frogs would come out and I'd simply give up. I'd go upstairs to the one bedroom where frogs couldn't be heard and cry myself to sleep. I began to relate my troubles to my friends, but they were no help. Sleep with the TV on. Get a fan and Reddit all night. Move. All good suggestions, but all meant losing to the frogs, and I was not going to lose to frogs. Could you imagine my obituary if I had? He was a good man, a wonderful husband and father, a leader in the community. He also started several businesses. One time he even sang with Prince. But he never beat the frogs. What a loser. I'm pretty sure that's how it would have gone if I'd quit. But I'm no quitter, so I decided to fight violence with violence. This made sense to me because I equated the frogs making me cry with violence. Anyone would. I am no Texas Aggie. I'm no country boy, but I do know what gig'em means. By this time, I figured it was them or me, and it was going to be them. So I got the longest flathead screwdriver I owned and waited for the frogs to make their nightly appearance. As much as I hated it, as squeamish as I was about the potential of frog innards splashing about, I was at the murderous end of my rope. Sure enough, around 11 p.m., I heard the first "Brap." I went outside and found a frog hidden in a crevice down among the rocks. He just looked up at me, frozen by the beam of my flashlight. I said, "Sorry, frog, but it has to be this way," took a deep breath, screamed a battle cry, and plunged my screwdriver into the crevice. That's when I found out that the frog was about 10 inches down into the crevice, while my screwdriver was 8 inches long. I found this out via my hand being stopped by the rocks while traveling at full frog gigging speed. As I was screaming at the bloody stump of my hand, I thought I had at least wounded the frog. I had not. He was still in the crevice, and I swear he was smiling. Although I was maimed, I felt a little relief. I'm no monster. The frog was unhurt. That's good. Gigging was beyond my skill set. No frog blood on my hands. But still, the frogs had to go. What to do? I know. Call the experts. So back in the 90s, there were these things called radio shows. Lots of people had them and dispensed advice to their callers and listeners. You could tune in and get advice about home improvement, investing in stocks, or even why you were consistently unlucky in love. You could also get gardening advice. 2 local nurserymen hosted a daily show called Garden Line. And I figured that if anyone knows how to get frogs to go away, Ben Zach and Bill Olden would know. So I called in. "Hey guys, this is Greg in Clear Lake. I've got frogs in my pond and I want them to leave. Please tell me what chemicals or other type of voodoo I need to use in order to make the frogs go away." There was a pause. Then Ben or Bill said, "Why would you want frogs to leave? Frogs are beneficial." And that's how he said it. Beneficial. and it took him 4 seconds to say it. They aren't beneficial to sleep, their irate caller, me, said. Come on, guys, what do I use to chase away these frogs? Frogs are beneficial. I hung up, completely unsatisfied with Ben and Bill. If those guys weren't going to sympathize with me, what options did I have left? By this time, I was into my 3rd season of battling frogs and fighting off nightly nervous breakdowns. Clearly, I didn't have it in me to be a frog mass murderer, and I knew that even if I did get a taste for frog blood, there was no way I could kill every bullfrog in the greater Clear Lake area. There was only one thing to do. Start thinking like a frog. I asked myself, why do frogs come to your pond? I thought their croaking was like a booty call. Hey, other frogs, come over to this pond and let's have a giant orgy. I thought this because twice in more than 100 frog expeditions, I'd been gifted with a 2-for-1, oincus interruptus, if you will. But mathematically, it did not appear that mating was the reason for the nightly party in my pond. Well, what else do frogs do? Why, they eat. What do they eat? They eat bugs. What attracts bugs at night? A light. Do I have a bright spotlight shining on my pond at night? I do. Ladies and gentlemen, it came to this. All I had to do was turn off the spotlight. My problem, my 3-year all-out frog war was over in a day. No light, no bugs, no frogs. I'd done it. I'd outsmarted the frogs. And better yet, it was a bloodless victory. For the frogs, at least. My gigging hands still carry scars. Thank you.
Hey. All right, y'all. We've made it to the final story tonight, which means I'm about to get this shot. I'm so excited. I'm so excited. Anyway, again, I'm just going to take this moment to say thank you for letting me be up here, y'all. It was a crazy experience. Y'all got to see me hit myself in the face. Like, that's great. I can't wait to play that back for my mama. So this last story is called Instead, I Think About Toads, which is there's a difference between toads and frogs, by the way. I couldn't tell you what it is, but I know there's a difference. The last story is Instead, I Think About Toads, written by Joe Wozni and read by Shane Kelly.
Toads and frogs are both members of the family Bufonidae. All right,